Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is going to be part 6 and 7 of my Moonlight Waterfall series. I decided to combine the last two parts because they're mainly going to be about finishing the details on the painting and just further refining details on the painting. So if you're following along traditionally, go ahead and see part 1 of this series for all the canvas and the paint and the brushes that I use. The app we're going to be using is Infinite Painter on my Samsung Galaxy Note 12.2 tablet. So we're going to go ahead and work on the rocks some more. And I'm going to start with the Angelo brush, and if you're painting along traditionally, you can use the Filbert brush. And so what I want to do here is I want to go back and add some more dark rocks in the middle of the water. And so you can go ahead and get your dioxazine purple and throw a little white in it, or a little bit of ultramarine blue, and just go ahead and put in the rocks on the edges of the waterfall. And that just helps make the water look a little bit more jagged. And go ahead and add some more rocks down in the pool at the bottom of the waterfall, because this will give some interest to your water down below. And then I'm going to go ahead and highlight these rocks by using cadmium yellow light with a little bit of white thrown in it, and just go ahead and put this along the edges of your rocks. And this is going to be close to the final touches. Now the rocks just have lots of layers, and you just kind of have to work on refining them. And I know we keep working on the rocks. We've worked on the rocks in this painting more than anything else. But they're kind of important because they define what the waterfall looks like. So here I'm going to go ahead and blend in the highlights, but we don't want to blend all the white out. We just want to go ahead and blend it along the edges again, because this is getting close to the final highlights. And if you're doing this traditionally, it takes a lot of glazes with acrylic to go ahead and to get these highlights on the rocks too. So it's the same thing with a digital process as it is with acrylic. You just have to keep working on glazes to get these rocks to build up their form and to get them to look natural-like. And so I'm going ahead and doing that process here. And then I want to go ahead and I want to work on the water again. And so I'm going to go ahead and use the same brush to go ahead and put some dark purple in just along the edges, just so that it looks like the rocks are peeping through the water there and making them look jagged on the edge. And you just go ahead and do this. You go back and forth. You work on the rocks, you work on the water. It's just a process that you do when you're finishing a painting, and it can get tedious, but depending on how detailed you want your painting to look, it's kind of something that you just have to do. So I'm going ahead and blending in the dark a little bit here on the waterfall again. And you can do that with your finger if you're doing this naturally. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some more highlights to the water along the edges. I want it to look a little more jagged. And so I'm using a dry brush technique when you're working traditionally, just to add little streams and drips of water along the waterfall and into the bottom of the pool here. We want the water to run around the rocks. And then I'm going to go ahead and take the Pollock brush and make splashes along the edge of the waterfall. And again, you're using white acrylic gesso with a touch of cadmium yellow light thrown in. And if you're doing this traditionally, just take the end of your filbert brush and tap it on the edges of the waterfall, and it will splay the brush hairs out so that it looks like they're splashing a little bit. If you want to, you can even get an old toothbrush and dip it in a really watered down thin version of this paint color and go ahead and splatter it. Just don't get too carried away. You just want little splashes because this waterfall is kind of a slow moving waterfall. So you just want that look though along the edges of your waterfall. And so here I'm working on the waterfall a little bit more. And then I need to work on the bushes. I want to highlight and shape their form a little bit more. So I'm using probably dioxazine purple with a little bit of white in it. And then I'm going back and using a darker color of dioxazine purple. And this is just working on the form of your bushes. You just kind of want to give the bushes a sort of an interconnected looking form along the edges. And so I'm going to go ahead and add the highlights here. Now this is not the final bright highlight, but it's pretty close. And this you just work and form what you want the bushes to look like here. And you want them to look real fluffy and leafy right here. And so then I'm using a little bit to blend in along the edges, but make sure that you don't kill all your highlight here. And then for the twigs, I'm using a really light color. And I'm going to go ahead and just add in some little twig parts that look like little branches. And you can go ahead and use your same highlight color if you want to for that. And then you can switch to dark purple, almost black. You can add dark purple and ultramarine blue together and go ahead and make the twiggy looking branches in the bottom of the painting. And you do this in the right hand corner to make an eye stopper, which means that you add something interesting so that people don't get bored and look away from your painting. And just go ahead and pick and add that through your bushes. And then I did a little bit of touch up on the pine trees. And then I decided to go ahead and sign the painting. But when I sign the painting, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily finished. And I wasn't through. So I went ahead and I added the mist to the painting. And you can go ahead and use the airbrush to do this. And if you're doing this traditionally, you just take your brush and scrub a dry brush stroke on here, and with your filbert brush is fine, and then take a paper towel and rub it over the top of it, and that gives it kind of a real misty look here. And you want it over the moonlight, along the edges of your waterfall, you know, just along the edges of the trees. Okay, so that was what I did for part 6. But I went ahead and added part 7 because it's just the same thing. It's just further refining the details here. So for part 7, I just went back and I looked at the rocks again. And I looked at the bushes again. And I decided I wanted to work on their shape just a little bit more. So I went ahead and I added some more highlights to the bushes, and I made them more interconnected to each other. It just looks better sometimes when you interconnect bushes and grass, because they were looking a little bit splotchy and isolated. So I kind of wanted to connect them just a little bit, you know, kind of in a Z pattern or a stair-step pattern. And then once again, yes, I'm working on the rocks. Just a little bit more. I decided that they look too uniform. So I want to go ahead and add a little black, a little dark. It wasn't black, it was dioxazine purple and ultramarine blue. Using the filbert brush, or you know, just any brush that gives you a little bit of detail. And the Leo brush on Infinite Painter. And I worked on the shapes of them again because I just thought they looked too uniform. And that's one of the things that you can do. You can finish your painting and then look at it for a day or two, and then come back to it and decide what you want to change on it and if it needs something. Now don't get carried away and just change the whole thing and say, oh my gosh, this is awful, I'm just going to change the whole thing. No, don't do that. Just think about it and look at the details that you want and go ahead and add just tiny little details, but don't do massive revisions unless you see something really wrong. But that's what I would recommend. You know, just take a step back and look at it for a day or two and decide, okay, well, I just need to touch the rocks up a little bit here. And so that's what I did. I decided the rocks looked too uniform. So I've gone back with the same process, adding dark, adding light, and refining the shapes on them just a little bit more. And blending it in again, same process. And yes, it gets tedious, but it's up to you on what you want to do. If you want to get it that detailed, if you want to nitpick just a little bit more, don't get too nitpicky, but just a little bit more. And then I went ahead and added the mist back again. So I added some more mist over the rocks that I changed. And here I'm adjusting the brush in Infinite Painter for a real thin, not very opaque look on the mist, because I just want it slightly over the rocks and the adjustments that I made. And so I'm going to go ahead and do it along the edges there and up around the top. And then I wanted to add a little bit more splashes again because I put in new rocks. So I wanted to add splashes with the Pollock brush and go ahead and do that, you know, just along the edges where I changed the rocks. And these are the final details. This is what you have to do. You just go ahead and make a few changes and then look at it and decide whether you like it and if you're finished or not. I decided that this was good enough and that I didn't need to do any more tweaking to it, so I went ahead and finished it. I'd like to show you an example of an acrylic one that I did a few years ago. As you can see, I added a little bit more color to it, but you can do it however you want to. You can make it monochrome or you can add more color to it. It just depends on what you want. Okay, this is the end of our Moonlight Waterfall series, and I'm going to be coming up with a brand new painting and a brand new series soon, so just stay tuned. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below. And thanks everybody for your support. Thank you for watching, and I will catch everyone later.